Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Business of Gaming podcast. I'm Josh with Game Haven Guild, and today we are sitting down with Justin and Anne-Marie DeWitt, the owners of Fireside Games in Austin, Texas. They have designed and published several award-winning games in the last 16 years, including Castle Panic and Hot Shots, and have a new game coming out called Please Don't Burn My Village. Can you guys take us to the beginning? 16, 18, 20 years ago, where did we start saying, okay, I want to design board games?
Well, it kind of started with me. Even when I was a kid, I would make games. I loved making games as a kid, making my friends play them. This is way before video games. That's how old I am. And then kind of fell out of that when I fell into video games, as people do. And then it was around, I'd say, 2000 when we played Catan. Settlers of Catan. I had a friend who brought us over. We played a German version. And it kind of blew my mind. It's like, oh, this is what board games could be now. It was this whole new world that I got exposed to. And it was the kind of thing where you'd go to the game store and you already knew all the games that were there. You were looking for the new ones. There weren't enough new ones then. So started fiddling around with it again, evenings and weekends. Basically, there were games that I wanted to play that weren't out there yet. So I started looking for those kind of games and making them. Various amounts of success until we started working really on Castle Panic. And then that was the one where I had made some games where people weren't cooperating. And I saw an opportunity to make a game where everybody worked together against the game. And that was super new at the time. And we had this thing where once it started working, which wasn't at first, it was terrible. Once we got it working, it became the kind of thing our friends were asking us to bring it over. And they were like, okay, yeah, I'll bring that castle game. Sure, we'll try it again. And then people would like it and have fun and tell their friends to come over and play it. And we knew we had something. So that was what really got me into designing games, refining them. And Castle Panic was our first one. Pushed all the way with that. And we'd always wanted to start a business in some way or another. During this time, I'd worked for Steve Jackson Games and learned a lot about the industry. And then decided like, okay, let's launch our own company. Let's just do it. This is way before Kickstarter and all that. We just literally saved up a bunch of money, wrote a big scary check, and off to the races. Our game turned out to be a hit. And there you go. We've been busy ever since.
So from the beginning, you were thinking about publishing your own games. Did you ever consider having someone else publish them?
Yeah, I mean, that was actually originally the first thought. Having worked for Steve Jackson Games and just been around games, I'd seen how that had sort of worked. And originally that was my plan. But the biggest problem we had was we couldn't find anybody we felt was a good fit for Castle Panic at the time. And also I had about 7 or 8 other games that I wanted to make. And when we took a step back, we're like, well, it's not that I have a game or two. We have like a brand. They were all similar. They were all we like called gateway games. It was like getting people into the hobby, which back in 2009 was still pretty hard to do. People were scared of board games back then. So we had this great idea of like, we build this whole brand around this idea of that maybe we should do our own thing. I had looked into doing some freelance work, but like I said, the biggest problem really was we didn't have a good home for the games I was working on. We were really kind of doing something unique in terms of the type of gameplay, the depth and strategy of what we're looking for. Wasn't one of those big crunchy games, and these weren't light party games either. It was kind of an in-between. So that's where we decided, let's do it. Now, it kind of makes sense for us to do this not out of the blue, because my background was graphic design, illustration, and I've been working in the board game industry. And her background was writing, editing. She had a lot of business savvy. She was the vice president of a company for a while. So we had a bit of a Venn diagram of skills that made sense for us to start a company. We weren't just running around in the woods going, let's make a company.
So that first year, Castle Panic is ready to go. What were the first steps in actually creating a publishing company?
Well, I mean, really first from the business side, it was incorporating and getting our books set up and, making sure that the business end was taken care of, setting up the website, making sure that we were ready for people to come to us. And we actually kind of made some mistakes that we didn't have to pay for, fortunately. And we got the production run starting before we even had figured out distribution. And so I really we really lucked out that, while it was being manufactured, we actually, because of Justin's work with Steve Jackson Games, we knew some folks that worked at Publisher Services Incorporated out of Georgia. And so we pitched Castle Panic to them, and they felt like Castle Panic would be a great addition to their line. And so they signed us as a publisher. So there's to this day our consolidator. So they handle all of our sales worldwide.
Could you explain what a consolidator is for us?
Yeah. So a consolidator, they basically take our inventory and it's on consignment. So we don't have to pay for the warehousing. They're holding it for us so that when they make sales into domestic hobby, international hobby, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Target, Walmart. I haven't been in Walmart yet. But
Goals.
yeah, goals. That's right. Hashtag goals. They're they're the ones that are the face to the sales teams for those retailers. And they're the face to the distributors and the hobby side, so that they're the ones selling our product in. That allows us to focus on game design and development and the rest of it. Now, that doesn't relieve us of a lot of marketing and sales on our end. And so much over the years has kind of transitioned to a lot of direct sales with retailers. And so we've had to kind of open that up also. But a consolidator does a lot of the nitty-gritty lifting.
You mentioned building out a website earlier, and when this came out in 2009, was the consolidator fulfilling your online sales?
They don't fulfill our online even still. We handle all our own online sales. Now, I say that I can fill out a spreadsheet and submit it to them, and they will fulfill it out of the warehouse, but it's not a direct line from our Shopify store to their warehouse. We don't have that integrated. They're still working on that. That would be really nice, to have that working. In fact, we just signed this February with basically a European consolidator out of the Netherlands that we are going to be able to interface our website with their portal, their web portal, so that if you're from a European country or from the UK, you can go in and purchase the game, and instead of purchasing through our shop, it basically links to their shop, and they can do all the fulfillment directly from their warehouse. And then the shipping is reasonable. I mean, we have our UK VAT and our German VAT numbers. And so we can technically sell, but the shipping cost is so much. And we'll get customer complaints about the shipping. I'm like, I know, but we're about to have that solved. So that'll feel good.
So let's take it back to 2009. Castle Panic comes out, and it does pretty well right out of the gate.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It blew all our expectations. Yeah.
We thought we had probably 2 years worth of inventory, and it sold out in 10 weeks. So it kind of caught us, back on our heels. And so it took 3 months before we had the next print run in. And so it came out in September, and we had sold out, 10 weeks. So we kind of even missed the Christmas, month, December. And then I don't think we had replenishment until like March or April. And then that sold out in like 3 months. And so for the first couple of years, we were trying to just catch ourselves.
A lot of my day-to-day was just, Emery was working her full-time job at the time, and so it was all me. And my job was mostly keep the gears rolling and keep getting the next print run ready and trying to estimate how many should we print this year, or how this print run, and how many can we afford to print. That was the other thing, was growing the business, dumping all the money back in to make another print run and grow it. That was huge. Meanwhile, trying to work on other games.
The last question on Origins, how did you actually pick who to print with, both for the first one, as well as did you change as you went along?
I reached out to a lot of people in the industry. I like to say I asked a lot of really smart people, a lot of really dumb questions on how to get started with a business back then. And they were all very kind. And part of what I learned was I got a couple of contacts for different printers, and then did some Google searching back then, and ended up reaching out to a handful of printers and seeing where they would work. Tried a few domestics and realized we weren't going to be able to make that work. So I started talking with Chinese printers, and I ended up finding a company that I could talk to their people in, I think it was Chicago, and they would handle the printing in overseas in China. So I didn't have to be working directly with the Chinese manufacturer, which was super great. Also, they were willing to run the low numbers we needed, because back then most game printers couldn't do anything less than 5,000 units minimum. A lot of them weren't even that low. Some were 7,500. And we knew we weren't going to be that. Our very first print run was 3,500. And I had to kind of beg them to do that. And then the next one I came back was like, okay, more. I ended up essentially finding somebody that would work with us on print run. I got a good vibe working with them. The communication was really good, because that was one of the things back then. I don't think a lot of the Chinese companies were used to working with as many, you should say, different American publishers. So the communication was rough. The times were weird. I'd be getting emails at 2 a.m. and stuff. So having somebody domestic I could work with was a saving grace. And we were with them for like our first, I think, 8 printings or something like that.
Something like that.
I forget the exact number, but at some point I started getting a little more educated and being a little more flexible. And I found other competitive bids. We started outsourcing or putting out bids for other games. And we found people that were either more competitive or had slightly better quality or et cetera. There's always reasons. But since then, we've worked with probably half a dozen printers or so, I'd say. We we work with a bunch of different people. Some of them are a bit more specialized in certain ways. Some of them are the communication's better. Some we've just worked with so long we have such good relationships with now. But yeah, originally it was a bit of a kind of see who you like the best and roll the dice and pick one.
If you were starting out from scratch today, though, and you had to pick one, what are the key things you would look for and or questions you would ask to help weed out the options?
Well, the biggest thing now I would say is the field is much more level than it was even 5 years ago in terms of quality. Most people are putting out excellent games. It doesn't matter who they are, unless there's someone you've never heard of. What I would do right now is kind of what I do. When I'm reaching out to a new printer, especially, I look at their history. Who have they worked with? What games are they printing right now? What games aren't they printing that they were in the past? And I have enough contacts in the industry, I can reach out and go, hey, you're not with them anymore. Can you tell me why? Or, boy, you've been with them forever. How's that? Everybody in this industry is super friendly. We're all happy to talk about that kind of stuff. There's also, that's not really trade secret that anyone will take your money and make a game. That's one of the biggest things right now would be quality of what they're doing, overall feedback like that. And then it kind of comes down to pricing and how quick they are with both feedback and turnaround. Because some people will promise you one thing and then deliver something else. And you won't know that unless you can talk to someone else. But also those people tend to get burned very quick. If there was people who promises they can do the game this and then they add on a bunch of costs, no one works with them. So the big names you've heard of or may or may not have heard of printers, they're all pretty common. A lot of us work with the same 5 or 6 people kind of thing. Some companies are a little bit known for different levels of quality. Like, for example, Panda does really nice games, and Panda's really good if you're a new designer and you're just getting started. They are really good about kind of holding your hand, walking you through the process, showing you alternatives to different materials, processes, and really helping you make the best game you can. But you're going to pay for that. I haven't worked with Panda because I've got enough experience now. I kind of know what I'm doing. They've been great to work with in terms of our communication with them, but we've never been able to pull the trigger just for price. They've just always been a lot more expensive. Other printers, sometimes they're a good deal. Sometimes they're a little underpriced. We've canceled jobs with printers because they've been weird. So, early on, I think it comes down to the biggest key things. Are they going to do the quality you want? Are their prices good? And what's it like to work with them? What's the vibe? How do you like their communication style? How easy are they to work with? How fast are they to respond and stuff? So very much a package like that.
Same question about the consolidators. What would be the questions you would ask today?
I would have more questions for the publisher, and like it depends on kind of what's the nature of their business and what are they hoping that the consolidator can do for them. If they're already doing a lot of direct sales and they want to keep doing direct sales, consolidator may or may not be for them. I don't know if they're going to get, unless they're really trying to use a consolidator to expand into, the distribution model into more sales in the book space and the mass market space. That they would be great for that. So it all depends on kind of what you're coming to from and what you're looking to get out of it. I mean,
So maybe a consolidator isn't one of the first calls you should be making.
I mean, I it could be, I'm glad we got on with our consolidator early on because it saved us a lot of detail work, and because we don't have, like, I think of our consolidator, like the biggest benefit to me is cost containment, because when you're working out of a warehouse on your own and you're having in your sales flag for a month, not only are you hit with decreased revenues, you're hit with increased costs on the space that you're taking up in the warehouse. So when you're working with a consolidator, if I have slow sales one month, I'm not doubly hit with also warehousing costs. Now, obviously, they're taking out their percentage, with those sales that makes up for that. But it enables me to make better judgments about what my costs are going to be and make, better judgments around revenues. It helps smooth things out, and not having to have, all the extra energy making those phone calls myself and having to make those sales. And board gaming industry, as large as it's gotten, it's still based on relationships, so you also get to leverage the relationships that the consolidator has with all the different venues that they're selling into.
So Castle Panic's a hit. There are 3 things in your history that I want to ask you about after that, not necessarily in chronological order. But the first is, why was the second edition printed? What led up to that decision?
Yeah, that was a tricky one. We went round and round with that for a while. We did 20-something printings of Castle Panic before we pulled the second edition trigger. but we had been itching for it for a while. There were a couple of reasons. We wanted to update the art for one thing. We felt like it was starting to look like an aged game because it was 10 years old, but by the time we really got seriously started on the second edition, there were things we wanted to fix. There were a couple of minor edits to the game. Gameplay-wise, it was remarkably solid. Second edition is almost exactly the same game. We cleaned up a couple of FAQ issues, but primarily it's an art refresh. Also some graphic design. We did some stuff to work better with colorblind and things like that. So it's a more modern game, and I think just overall, art improvement. But it's kind of a weird story because part of that was when we wanted to do for the 10th anniversary, we'd been asked almost since the game came out to do a giant deluxe version with miniatures. Everybody always wanted a minis version of Castle Panic, but we decided we'd do that as a deluxe one, and that was going to be our first Kickstarter. We'd never done one before, and we knew this was going to be a ridiculously expensive, complicated project. So we did it. Long story short, we made the giant super deluxe collection, and as part of that, we went ahead and made second edition. It got the art refresh, and out of that came second edition, the retail version that we all buy in the stores today. So it was kind of a cost-saving way to make that happen, but also it was about, okay, if we're going to do this big change and put this big line in the sand of before and after, that's where second edition belongs. Really, it was a combination of things. It really was, though, I would say. It's been long enough, and when we knew we were going to do the deluxe one, it was like, we don't want to keep this art. We know this needs to be updated.
It was a hard decision because the hobby retailers that we would talk to, most of them said, don't change the art. It looks great. It's selling well. Don't mess with it if it's working, And then you have to consider also all of the online traction, all the SEO that's around that art and that look, and the recognition that we've gotten for that look. And we're having to start all over with essentially, you want a customer to see your game 7 times before they'll buy it. So, essentially we're having to start over, with our advertising and those touches, because it's not recognizable to the eye. And so that was a risk. Amazon was really tricky and risky, how to handle it's, considered now a variation, and, do we get a new SKU? How are we handling, and we had a lot of SEO around our Amazon listing as well. So, I had to think through, like, am I just trashing all of that data and all of, all the investment, and then
In hindsight, was it positive?
Positive. Yeah, positive. The other, and on the other side was Target was refusing to pick it up because they didn't like the cover, and so, like, okay. And we had tried a modified kind of keeping the art, but changing just the cover, and it still didn't get in. So, that was one of the motivators. And we got in some test orders with Target. We went for a year, and then Target has decided not to carry it forward, so, but I'm still happy that we made the change. It looks so much better. We do have people occasionally say, I prefer the old art.
That's really wonderful. I love that.
Yeah, I know, right. Well, and it allowed us to get more representation in as well, so it's nice to have, like, I used to have mothers and daughters come up and ask me why there aren't any women at Castle Panic, and I'm, that was really, I had no answer because I knew better, but I also knew, like, in that first edition, like, Justin drew that in like a month,
This game used to happen.
Yeah. So we weren't, it was just, we weren't thinking in terms of, representation at that point. It was just like, get the game done, it's time. So, but so second edition was the opportunity to kind of right those wrongs and, have people see themselves more in the game.
Yes,
so,
exactly.
Yeah.
So the second event I want to ask you about, you started doing expansions and variations. How do you pick what's an expansion versus a variation? Because now you've got a whole line of Panic games.
Yeah. I mean, that was fairly organic at first. The first expansion we came out with was the Wizard's Tower. And that has a weird story because a good 15-20% of that, I would say, was actually in some of the original Castle Panic concepts. But when we were playing this, you gotta remember this back in 2009, we would play this game with people who were new to gaming, and we wanted it to be this gateway game. And we found, even as simple as that game is by modern standards, it was confusing people. They were getting frustrated. They didn't like the rules. It felt too fiddly to them. So we peeled out a few of the more magical, powerful elements to make the game a little bit more basic medieval fantasy generic kind of thing. And that worked really well. So some of the things we peeled off, like the idea of some of the spells, magical powers, or certain effects monsters had, we took that and boiled it away. And meanwhile, I just kept coming up with more and more ideas. And as soon as Castle Panic came out, we had fans bombarding us with ideas for what they wanted. And I made a bunch of notes. If you look on our rules, you'll see we credit people who gave us cool ideas for monsters and effects and things. And so the first thing was pretty obvious. Bring the wizard in, bring the magic in, let it be more of the full Lord of the Ringsy kind of experience with your wizard. And then after that, I had other ideas that started gelling into like, okay, this is the expansion about one giant 8-point monster and his army that comes out. And then this is the one where you get to build stuff that I've been putting off for a few years. And so they all sort of coalesced into their own thing. And they've just kind of moved along the way in terms of what do we think is going to be most appealing right now that is going to add a change to the game that it doesn't currently have. And that's why the last one, Crowns and Quests, brought some of the biggest changes in that it brings like playable characters to the game and it puts this quest engine in where you now have to fight monsters and go on these quests. So you've got this whole system like that. The variations were more kind of business opportunities, I would say, really, right?
Yeah. Well, and the first one we started with was Dead Panic, and that actually came from fan suggestions.
Yeah, that's true.
So many asked for a zombie version. And we're like, okay, let's make a zombie version. But Justin is very steadfast about making sure that the variations give a new experience and it's not just a paint job.
Yeah.
And so it took a while to think through, like, okay, if this is a zombie version of this panic system, what does that look like? How does it feel? And that's when he came up with the idea of having a cabin in the middle and you're trying to escape. So instead of trying to defend it, you can, and it's really fun to watch people who've played Castle Panic play Dead Panic. And really, there's a certain point in the game you have to let the walls crumble, and you have to just get the radio, call that van, and get out. And just let the cabin go. And it's really fun when people realize, like, oh, I don't have to defend the central structure. Like the cabin can go. And so so that is its own unique experience. He brought in ranged weapons with that. And then I think the next one was Munchkin Pan.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So, and I actually did the design on that where I saw, so at first it was like Munchkin is really this backstabby, game. And then Castle Panic is this nice, friendly, cooperative game. And Justin was like, what is the, like, how do you fit those together? And I immediately saw that they're both about card combos. And so that's where you can blend them is, making sure that the card combos kind of help bring in the nature of both of them. And that way that's where they kind of meld. But then bringing in and it has the basic panic system, so I didn't have to worry about that being represented. But now, you want to have the most kills, so you don't have to. If you're in the lead, you might want to help the monsters take down the castle, so that the game ends. You can help end the game, and you're in the lead with the body count. And that, I think that brought a lot of fun, into that, backstabby element. So it felt very Munchkin-y, but still had the panic system to it. So
working our way to be Munchkin.
Yeah, yeah.
I think Star Trek was after that.
So let's talk about Star Trek, because it is Star Trek. How is it working with a huge IP like that?
The Star Trek one came about a little bit differently in that is a game that was actually manufactured by USAopoly. They're not called the Op. So they were the ones who had the license, and they reached out to us saying they had worked with Steve Jackson Games as well. So they're like, hey, we've worked with them. We'd like to work with you. We have an idea that we might, well, really, they were like, we want to work with the Castle Panic system. What can we do? We brainstormed some ideas, talked to them, told them we were open. And then they came back and said, hey, we've got this license. Can we make this work? And it turned out to be Star Trek, which I'm a huge Star Trek fan. So that was an easy one. So they ended up basically handling the license. I like to describe it as an Oreo. They were the cream filling. Paramount was on one side, or Columbia. I can't remember who had Star Trek at that time, but Star Trek was on one side. We were on the other. But it turned out it was kind of amazing. First off, the Op did an amazing job handling it. We had great feedback, great return, and Columbia was super in on things. They were all over what they wanted, what they didn't want. They were very clear with their feedback. They were very open to ideas too. They actually were open to a few things I push back on as a Star Trek nerd, going, well, that's not actually canon, so let's change that. Oh, that's a great catch, thanks. So there were things like that. I think there were a couple of minor issues we had that were some licensing things with rights for, I think it was some of the actors. We couldn't use certain people in certain poses, or I don't remember. There was some weird thing like that.
Well, it had to be a still photography from the series.
Right.
It had to be the original. It had to be still photography. So it couldn't be any new art or anything
Right.
like that.
It couldn't be
So
the
it was-
movies either. That
Yeah.
was the other thing. It had to be from the, which was fine. Now, the whole point was it was part of the 50th anniversary of the original series. I could have sworn we had some weird legal thing where there was like one picture we couldn't use, so we got another picture. Like that was the extent of the horribleness. No, they were great to work with. I'm sure there were conversations USAopoly had that maybe weren't quite as fun, but we sure got the good part.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the op made it really easy for us.
That was
Yeah.
And
I loved it because when it was all said and done, they said that I believe it was Columbia at the time, said that Justin's version, his implementation of Star Trek, was the most faithful implementation of the IP that they had seen. So I was really proud of Justin for that. So
Yeah.
I mean, that's quite the
it
accomplishment.
was, yeah, right. When the Star Trek people say you did good.
So both of you have designed several games at this point. When did you start looking at taking games from other designers to publish?
Well, the first one we took in was actually from our customer service rep who was working for us. She designed Here Kitty Kitty, and so it's a game where you're trying to lure cats onto your property, and Justin actually gave some really good feedback, and she did iterations, and
And you worked on it with
finally-
a lot of the
yeah,
design too. You kind of did more
Yeah.
of the dev work.
Yeah, I did dev work. Kind of, you helped with design, that initial design, and then I helped with dev work at the end. And so that was our first one, and it was really neat to have it kind of homegrown like that. We have dipped in and out of having outside submissions with greater and lesser success. Justin's designs have always sold the best for us. So the more we can get his designs on the market, the better. It will usually try to pull in the outside designs to help fill the gaps while he's designing. I mean, last year I probably looked at 500 game designs, and we signed one.
Mhm.
So it's a very competitive market. So you have to be super picky. And it's Please Don't Burn My Village was the one that we picked up, and it's very hard to make sure that every game out there needs to have a reason that it's on the market. And when you have 5,000 new games coming out a year, what's its reason? How is it an improvement? How is it an offering to the market? How is this something that the customer needs now? So it's really hard to just find that off the shelf.
Well, why don't you tell us about Please Don't Burn My Village? It's coming out now. What made it that one of the 500?
We were at a kind of an industry event, and there was a designer there that it actually was a tulip game. It was based on the tulip market system, and Justin played it and immediately loved it. And I would say I'm a little easier touch on I see something in a game that I like, and Justin's usually the one that's like, no. And he played it and immediately loved it. I'm like, if we both immediately love this game, from the start, I'm like, we've got to sign this game. And but there's already a couple of tulip games,
A lot of flower.
games out there, and just from a marketing perspective, it's like, how does that game entice someone to pick it up off the shelf? And I'm like, I'm not sure tulips do it. How's that engaging? And so we actually had we brainstormed a lot on that, and in fact, we started art that on a completely different theme. Yeah, too. That's right. Yeah. And then we were like, the pitch isn't quite working on this. It's not it doesn't feel like the mechanics are really lining up with that theme well enough. And so we just brainstormed some more, and then Justin said, what about a dragon? And then that kind of led us to what are you doing with the dragon? Okay, the situation is you're trying to bribe the dragon. Why are you bribing this dragon? Don't burn my village. We're like, well, let's call it that.
Yeah.
Please don't burn my
What
village.
if we just called it Please Don't Burn My Village?
Uh-huh. And then we were like, if you're gonna have a dragon, we might as well set it in the world of Castle Panic and help build that brand. So have some standalone games, because we have the expansions, we have the variations. Now
We already had a
standalone
dragon.
experiences. We already have the dragon, but then we gave the dragon like a little attitude, So it's the dragon from the Wizard's Tower, but the dragon in the Wizard's Tower has a more serious countenance, and this one has a little more playful, mischievous look on his face. So
he's much more interested in money,
yes, exactly,
as opposed to just destroying your castle.
Yeah. So we wanted to bring some humor into it, and so a reason to pick it up off the shelf. So we felt like a dragon that is giving you that look, and you've got this compelling, please don't burn my village, what's that about? Like, that's something that you want to find more out about, as opposed to Tulips of Amsterdam. It's like, oh, okay,
that's cool, but do I care?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's part of it. I mean, that level of marketing, even at that level of just like, what are we calling it and how does it work? That's huge, because we've seen games not sell because of title, art on the cover, box trim size, just a million reasons a game can fail. So you got to look at all those and start checking those boxes early to get past that. So
on the other side, we've also seen like boxes that don't tell you anything about the game, titles that aren't compelling, and they're like bestsellers. And I'm like, how is that working?
Yep.
But it does.
It is not an absolute guarantee.
It's not.
Nobody knows. That's the big thing whenever you launch a game, is you never know.
Yeah.
The other one you have announced is Ham Helsing, coming out soon. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that one is actually one that we were approached by the author and illustrator, Rich Moyer. He's the guy who came up with Ham Helsing. It's a series of books he's done. They're illustrated graphic novel books. And he reached out, and first I had to make sure he was real because it seemed too good of an offer. I'm like, wait, you just want me to make a game out of your book? And then I went and looked and I was like, oh, your book's adorable. Yes, let's do this right now. So unfortunately, he reached out while we were still finishing up Castlevania Deluxe, which took a lot of work and many years to get the whole thing done. So we had to kind of put it on hold until we could get it finished, which now it's here. But we wanted to mimic sort of the adventure style of the book. The book is about a series of, Ham goes and he meets some friends and they have this big adventure, and it turns out who you thought was the bad guy isn't, but there is a bad guy and you have to fight him. And I wanted to encapsulate that into sort of an adventure game. But also, as Emery said, every game needs a reason to exist now. Why is this one different? So it's cooperative, it's an adventure board game. And what we did is we wanted to level you up without being kind of a classic grindy dungeon crawl thing. So what we have now is part of the book has these spider minions that are running around causing chaos. And you fight those as you move around the board while the boss slowly creeps turn by turn closer to Mud Canyon. So what you're doing is you're starting out fairly low leveled with a deck of 10 cards that are in plastic sleeves. And as you fight these minions, you'll get skills that move up on a track on your player board, eventually towards getting you some free attacks. And you also get gold for them. And you spend this gold to buy clear cards out of a market that's face up, and you sleeve those into your cards and they line up and give you new powers. So you're growing your deck as you play. You'll never get more than 10 cards, but your 10 cards get better and better as you play. You decide what you add to what card. It can really change up your combos, that when you play a card, you may get extra movement, extra attacks. You might heal, you might draw cards. I might draw a card that lets you draw a card. Who knows? It's a lot of interactive cooperation like that. Meanwhile, you're moving around this board trying not to die while you hopefully build up enough strength to go attack the boss. And there isn't enough time to just level up and not worry about it. You're going to be having to make a hard decision of, I can't stop the minions from destroying that location. It's time to fight the boss. We're just going to have to ride that out. And of course, everything snowballs bad. And in the end, you either have a glorious pulling a victory from the jaws of defeat, or you go down in flames. So yeah, it's a 1 to 4 players. Plays in about an hour, a little more if it's 4 players. And then super cooperative, super engaging, really cute art, because Rich did all the art for it, the same illustrator who did the books. So it totally fits his world and all that. It was really fun to work with him on that. I'm really excited to get this one out there. I don't think anybody's done anything quite like that. This checks boxes I haven't seen before, and plays very different than even the closest card building games like that. So yeah, that's later this year. We're still crossing our I's and T's on that and dealing with some international issues, but it's coming.
Yeah, there are a couple of card crafting games that are coming out, Mystic Veil style, but I don't see any that are adventure games like this. So it's still, even though we have this habit of like happening upon a trend, and I don't know if like 2 other games make it a trend, but I still feel like this has its own place because it's doing something different with that card crafting.
Well, having done this now for 16 plus years, what is the one piece of advice you would go back in time and give yourself before you were just starting out?
Don't do it.
Don't do it. Yeah, right. Be very, very careful. Honestly, I would go back and talk to myself about the freelance versus you running your own business thing, because part of the problem was you don't know until you know something, but the amount of extra work it takes to run a game company that has nothing to do with making games is a bit overwhelming sometimes, especially when you get to where we are, where we're big enough that we need to like go to conventions. We have to make appearances in places. We have to deal with international shipping and safety testing and all that stuff. That's what most of my days are. The design that I love, that I wanted to do the day we wrote the check to start the company, that's so hard now. We have to really lock out time for that and be careful of how you spend your money and how you grow and all the risks that are out there. It's one of those things where, like I tell people, do you remember when a couple of years ago that ship got stuck in the Panama Canal? I'm sure you didn't care. I had a heart attack because I knew what that meant for global shipping and what that was going to do to everything. And when you hear about, oh, there's a backup at a port or there's a strike at a port, I can't sleep that night because that affects my day-to-day job. So that level of like, oh, wow, you have to pay attention to a lot of things. That's not the most fun. The tricky part is I don't know what our lives would have been like if we'd gone freelance. I mean,
I'm glad we did. I'm glad I didn't know.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And I'm glad we did it. I love package design. I love product design. I love thinking through like the best positioning for a game and how to have an offering from a mechanical standpoint as well as a product standpoint, and those being two very different things, and how to best kind of serve that to customers. It's a fun game to play in and of itself, but when your livelihood depends on you getting it right, like that's very stress inducing. So, and it's gotten harder. Like it used to be before 2016, we could just hit reprint on everything. Like I didn't worry about backlist, and like every reprint run sold through. Like, I didn't have to worry. Like, what do you mean product life cycle? Like no such thing. They all just sell all the time. And then about 2016, the glut started catching up with all of us, and I mean, when we started, there were about 1,000 new SKUs a year, and we had people advising us like, don't, it's already crowded. 1,000 to get, a year, don't do it, and now there are 5,000. No, since 2016, there have been about 5,000 new SKUs a year, and so, and not in. It feels like every game, kind of on average or the median, across gaming, you start seeing lower sales per game because you're not only competing with the new games that came out this year, but the games that came out the year before and the year before that. And that's honestly, that's why we didn't reprint Hot Shots back in 2017, because we were told it's a one and done environment. Retailers were telling us like, when you sell through that first print run, don't get a second one going because
move on to the next thing.
Yeah, just move on, and it's a one and done. And we actually had it on our hands, didn't realize it. Yeah. So we're bringing that one back. But they're right, for the most part, like it's very dicey, and so that creates problems around, how much am I spending on marketing? And we used to like be able to just kind of blow it out at that first print run, and you're not worried about making any money on that first print run. You make your money on your second and your third. But what you can't depend on, having more than one print run, then you have to start looking at marketing differently. But if you don't do enough, then you haven't, done enough for it. And so you might not even sell through that first print run. So it's gotten trickier and trickier.
Yeah.
Well, if someone wants to find one of your games, where's the best place to find them?
Oh, definitely our website, firesidegames.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you both for joining us today and telling your story.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you.